Thank you for joining me, everyone. I am Red Pill 78, the corruption detector, and this is your Red Pill News Brief. I have attempted to record this video many times, and I'm really hoping this is going to be my last take. Something does not want me to put videos out because I had issues with my mic on the live stream. Once I turned it off, after I got it to work, I had issues with my mic just recording videos, and then I had issues saving the videos. So I am praying to God that this is the last take I must do on this video. First of all, from the Daily Crusader, French protesters planning a bank run with potential to devastate the entire euro currency system. From Paris, France, the Gilets jaunes protesters, fed up with increasing control from the French government, including tyrannical policing of peaceful protesters and new martial law rules, enacted to hamstring the protesters, which includes a leaked plan to confiscate all firearms from French citizens, as reported by the Clover Chronicle, are now planning a bank run, which would see most French civilians withdrawing all of their funding from France's bank. French banks, which already run on a fractional reserve system, are estimated to have less than 1/4 of the funds on hand needed to satisfy a bank run conducted by citizens in the city of Paris alone, let alone the entire French nation. This has the potential to completely tank the euro if the protesters manage to pull it off. The speculation has led to widespread panic among the Zionist elites who run Europe's central banks. Many already believe the banks are planning on stealing the money anyways, which may lead to a self-fulfilling prophecy as citizens withdraw money and banks end up closing down without satisfying the citizens' needs. Essentially a theft. There is currently little faith among French citizens that the French government, led by President Emmanuel Rothschild Macron, would hold these criminal banksters accountable for their crimes at all. The movement is already being called a Western winter to contrast the Arab Spring. If this ends up working in France, it may spread to neighboring nations such as England, where there have already been sporadic Yellow Vest protests, and Germany, where an AfD leader was nearly assassinated earlier today in another globalist leftist attempt to subvert the will of a nation's sovereign people. We at Daily Crusader wish God's blesses and Godspeed to the French who are fighting against globalist control. And pointing to those Yellow Vest protests erupting in the UK, from The Guardian, the police are after all of us. The police are after all of us. Pro-Brexit protesters ditch yellow vests. Such was the official fuss after Yellow Vest protesters harassed and verbally abused Anna Soubry outside Parliament that a day later, the fellow activists who had turned up again were being so low-key they did not even don their trademark garments. "They're in the bag," said one man, who, like all those present, declined to be identified. "We'll put them on when there's more of us. The police are after all of us, so we've got to be careful." With police having promised to respond to any future incidents, 6 police vans were parked opposite Parliament, and officers greatly outnumbered the men, some of whom identified themselves instead with Union flag bobble hats. The outcry has followed weeks of intermittent action by a small, varying, and semi-organized group, primarily men, who have borrowed the outfit and the tactics of France's much larger Gilets jaunes movement to barrack MPs and journalists seen as opposing Brexit. In recent weeks, they have also blocked Westminster Bridge, shouted sometimes sexist and racist abuse at TV crews, stormed into the offices of a radio station and the Labour Party, and held small demonstrations in a series of cities. The most visible figure throughout has been James Goddard, a self-styled political activist with close links to the far right and a background in making anti-Muslim comments, who solicits public donations to continue his activities. Goddard, who filmed an earlier targeting of Soubry in December in which he and a group of men called the Conservative MP a traitor and on the side of Adolf Hitler, has routinely promoted himself by live streaming his confrontations on Facebook. However, both of his Facebook pages disappeared on Tuesday. Goddard tweeted that the company had silenced him, and a link to his PayPal donations page also stopped working. He did not appear outside Parliament, and one of his fellow protesters said Goddard feared being arrested. The man said of Goddard, "He turned up about 9 months ago. He's a new kid in town, a normal working-class boy, passionate. They claim he's our leader, but he's not our leader. There's no leader." There is Goddard right there. According to the men, Goddard started his protests like several other Yellow Vest members, in response to a conspiracy theory popular with anti-Muslim activists connected to a case in which 3 teenage boys were killed by a driver in West London. The driver, Jaynesh Chadasma, was found to have been speeding, drunk, and under the influence of cannabis when he ran the boys over in January last year and was jailed for 13 years. However, Goddard and other activists have claimed, without evidence, that the deaths were a terrorist attack covered up by police. He was among a group who disrupted a court hearing in the case in December. Much like their French counterparts, the UK Yellow Vest group are somewhat opaque about their aims beyond securing Brexit. "I've never been a member of any political party. It's about justice," one said. Another said he was uncomfortable about the incident on Monday, in which Sabri was shouted at and abused as she walked back to Parliament after a TV interview nearby. "It was a bit over the top, if you ask me," the man said. "All her, I was being prevented from entering Parliament, isn't true, but if I was her, I wouldn't be happy with that sort of treatment. She was treated very harshly." Now, I've seen reports to suggest that this gentleman right here, that is leading this group of people next to James Goddard, he's actually an undercover police officer. He's been seen around town stirring up trouble and attempting to get the police involved. He was even shown on film passing something to Salisbury's head security agent. On Tuesday evening, police on the parliamentary estate arrested a man as he tried to gain entry to the Palace of Westminster via carriage gates. Scotland Yard was not treating the incident, which happened at about 7:20 p.m., as terror-related. The man, who has not been named, was taken to a police station. And here is some footage of the incident I was just speaking about.
She'll come back and say, let's have another vote because I've got perhaps another concession from the EU. This could go on for a while.
No, and that's why, that's the other thing that has now got to happen, is we have to be absolutely... I do object to being called a Nazi, actually.
Right. Well, apologies to you if you're offended by what you're listening to.
I just think this is astonishing. This is what has happened to our country.
Why are you doing that? I'm independent against you. Super. He's our face.
I think he just called me David Lemmy.
Oh, what's the cultural appropriation?
Cultural appropriation.
You lost people's vote. Anna, you're a fascist. Anna, fascist. You're a tampon. A tampon. I'm a tampon. Listen to these lovely people. Look at these lovely people. Keep going. That's a question. Come on, let's have it. Why do I wait? Why are you writing? Why do you write? Why are you misleading articles? Listen, you are a horrible little liar. So how many people attended the Brexit rally out here? And you lost the people's vote.
Traitors like you were told what the people think.
You are a traitor. You are a traitor to this country. You are on the side of Adolf Hitler. Come on, Sobri.
What's the problem?
Why do you think you're better than 17.4 million? Come on.
The group Hope Not Hate, which monitors far-right activity, or alleged far-right activity, has alleged that the UK Yellow Vest protesters are linked to a new far-right group called the Liberty Defenders, which is supported by Nick Griffin, the former leader of the British National Party. Hope Not Hate said activists were planning protests this weekend in Cardiff, Birmingham, Manchester, and Leeds, and were thinking about targeting the offices of Remain voting Labour MPs. Nick Lowles, the head of Hope Not Hate, said that amid the Brexit process, the threat from the far right is growing and the risk of disorder and violence is on the rise. He said the British far right are attempting to copy the French Yellow Vest protests in order to stir up trouble and harass, threaten, and attack their political opponents. While the protesters insist they were not linked to such views, Goddard in particular has been associated with the anti-Muslim activist Tommy Robinson, whose real name is Stephen Yaxley Lennon, and shares similar views. Last year, he spoke at a rally calling for then-jailed Robinson to be freed from a prison sentence for contempt of court. Last June, Goddard shared a picture on Twitter of himself posing with the leader of UKIP, Gerard Batten, who in November appointed Robinson as an advisor. Goddard has posted anti-Muslim messages on the social media site Gab, which is popular with far-right users. In one message, he said, "Wherever Islam exists, you will find murder and rape." True and true. In a video posted last year by Goddard, he filmed himself castigating a young woman taking part in a pro-Palestine demonstration. When told to go away, he responded, "Educate yourself, love. I bet you're a feminist as well, aren't you? Sort yourself out, you mug." I love it. Okay. Now in an update from the Gateway Pundit on the Roy Moore Alabama Senate race, they cheat. Democrats caught running second FF internet campaign during Alabama Senate race. Corrupt Democrats ran a Facebook smear campaign against Judge Roy Moore in the Alabama Senate race in 2017, and Facebook allowed it. Democrat activists took what Russia did on a minute scale in the 2016 election and ramped it up times 1,000. Please note, Russia's 2016 disinformation campaign targeted both pro-Trump and pro-Hillary supporters. The liberal mainstream media does not like to mention this in their reporting. Russia spent just $6,000 in the last 6 weeks of the 2016 election on ads. Russia spent only $4,600 on Google ads in the 2016 campaign. The Russian influence in the 2016 election was minimal and is one of the biggest lies by the left of this century. Democrats, however, took this Russian model and ramped it up times 1,000,000. Facebook allowed this to happen. LinkedIn billionaire Reid Hoffman was a top funder of this deception, but it gets better. The same hacks who ran this deceptive campaign against Judge Roy Moore are the same people who wrote the junk Russia interference report for the U.S. Senate. The same people. Robbie Starbuck on Twitter says, huge scoop from the New York Times. We orchestrated an elaborate FF operation that planted the idea that the Moore campaign was amplified on social media by a Russian botnet. Democrats admit to using disinformation to influence the Alabama election. Another angle to this big New York Times story. Guess who participated in using a Russian-style disinformation campaign to influence the Alabama Senate election and hoped to frame Russia for it? The CEO of the company that wrote the Senate Intel report on 2016 election meddling. Now this. Liberals ran a fake online campaign during the Alabama Senate race, linking Judge Roy Moore to a fake ban on liquor in the state. The group was able to amass 4.6 million followers on Facebook. They spent serious money to make this happen and likely had Facebook's support for their nefarious actions. Law and Crime reported a new report by the New York Times reveals that an online campaign meant to look like a push by Moore's Republican supporters to ban drinking alcohol in the state was really a creation of progressive Democrats looking to frighten moderates into opposing Moore. The Dry Alabama campaign resulted in Facebook posts getting 4.6 million views and videos promoting the false message receiving 430,000 views, according to an activist, Matt Osborne, who told the New York Times he helped come up with the campaign. Such tactics are perfectly legal under current campaign laws, but even those involved with the Dry Alabama campaign appear to acknowledge that this could and perhaps should change. The law has clearly not caught up with social media, said Beth Becker, a consultant who handled Facebook ad spending for Dry Alabama, which raised $100,000. Based on current laws, however, Becker said, I don't think anything this group did crossed any lines. So perhaps not illegal, but certainly unethical. And lastly, from the Daily Caller, gingerly preparations are underway in case of a Ginsburg vacancy. Quiet preparations are underway within conservative legal circles in the White House counsel's office in the event that Supreme Court Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg retires. Two sources familiar with the process have told the Daily Caller. The 85-year-old Ginsburg did not appear for oral arguments at the Supreme Court on Monday, missing the first session in her 25 years on the court for reasons of ill health. Ginsburg is currently recuperating from recent surgery to remove cancerous nodules from her lungs, marking her third bout with the disease. Gingerly preparations are underway, not just for Ginsburg, but for any SCOTUS retirement. A source directly involved in the Supreme Court nominations of Justices Neil Gorsuch and Brett Kavanaugh told the D.C. Another source emphasized to the D.C. that the quiet preparations are all that is realistically needed in case of a vacancy on the court because much of the required infrastructure already exists within the White House. Both sources said that the White House counsel's office and its conservative legal allies have now been through 2 successful confirmation processes, and that they have developed an intimate and professional feel for how to run the process again, if necessary. Trump is particularly proud of his handling of the Gorsuch and Kavanaugh nominations, a source close to the White House said, noting that the president views proper handling of the Supreme Court as a necessary part of maintaining the support of his voters. I would have to agree. This will become extremely important in the near future. And I just want to ask, why is she wearing gloves inside? That's so weird. The opening would be the first under White House counsel Pat Cipollone, who assumed the position after Don McGahn. Cipollone is a longtime Washington lawyer intimately familiar with the conservative ecosystem. By appointing Pat, Trump has made sure he has a White House counsel who is both able to handle the investigation and a movement conservative philosophically aligned with the base of the party, American Conservative Union Chairman Matt Schlapp told the DC. Pressed on Trump's lack of public discussion of any potential Supreme Court nomination, Schlapp noted that Trump has figured out there are some things you keep close to the vest. He likes to be the explainer-in-chief, but understands there's a downside to sharing too much. John Malcolm, senior legal fellow at the Heritage Foundation, similarly told the DC that Cipollone has very bright movement conservatives around him as staffers and expressed confidence in his preparations to fill a vacancy on the court. Malcolm speculated that if Ginsburg's seat becomes vacant, there would be a lot of pressure to appoint a woman. I would think that one person the president would seriously look at would be Amy Coney Barrett. Of course, the White House did not respond to a request for comment. What do you guys think of Amy Coney Barrett? I like her. I think that she would be an excellent justice. I appreciate her positions, and I like her personally as an individual. All right, guys. Well, that's it for this report. I want to thank you very much for joining me. Once again, I am Red Pill 78, the corruption detector, and this was your Red Pill News Brief. Thank you, everyone, and God bless.